In 1982, Alice Walker published a novel narrated entirely by a 14-year-old girl in rural Georgia. She writes letters to God in her own voice. No one standing between her and her readers. No one vouching for her. No intermediary. And it won the Pulitzer Prize. Nobody'd written that book before because the form that could hold it didn't exist yet. Walker had to build it. That's the pattern across all 20 novels on this list, and it's the part we miss. We read this tradition for what it's about: slavery, migration, family, and the city. The actual story is what each of these writers had to invent in order to say any of it. Brown had to invent a novel. Johnson had to reinvent one. Hurston handed her story to Janie and let her tell it to a friend on a porch. Naylor knew a community couldn't be carried by one person's story alone. Everett took one of the most famous narratives in American literature and he rebirthed it. Each one a new speaker, every one a new form. 23 novels, 1853 to this year. And at the end, I'm not going to hand you the new It book. I'm actually going to give you 3 and let you pick which one you think will go forward. This is a reading list rather than a ranking in 5 chapters. The ones I've covered already in full episodes get a mention and a clause. The famous ones, they don't really need much of an introduction, and I've gone over those a couple of times. Everything you haven't seen on this channel gets the full time. Brown fills his novel with evidence meant to show the artificiality of the color line. Harper creates a heroine whose humanity refutes classification. And Johnson writes a fake memoir and uses the form to sketch a man with no identity. We'll start our list at the beginning, of course, where every good list should begin. Widely credited as the first Black American novel ever published, Clotel from 1853 by William Wells Brown implicates Thomas Jefferson in fathering a child with an enslaved woman he'd owned. It's a composite sentimentalist novel of different materials from the age. It's also a melodrama that actually may not hold up to contemporary tastes, but it's really a heck of a historical artifact. 40 years later, a woman who'd spent her entire life on abolition platforms tries the same borrowing. And she puts the argument inside of a body instead of a stack of evidence. Like Clotel before, Iola Leroy follows the American sentimentalist tradition. Harper was a noted abolitionist and speaker, and even after the Civil War, she continued to publish. Iola Leroy was published when she was 67 years old. Like Clotel, her novel dramatizes the plight of a mixed-race woman, but in Harper's novel, her protagonist initially struggles with her newly discovered identity as a Black woman. It experienced solid popularity in its time, selling approximately 12,000 copies. For historical interest, however, it's a powerful example of an important rhetorical device that finds some kinship with her contemporary, Charles Chesnutt. The color line was a primary flashpoint after Reconstruction, so a chief argument among opponents, like Harper, was to point out the contradictions in racialized social hierarchies. Like Chesnutt, Harper's characters violated the easy classifications just by existing, and their moral righteousness disproved the centuries' prevailing myths about race. Harper was one of the most famous Black women of her time, and her legacy was reconstructed in the late 20th century when academics reaffirmed her stature within the tradition. Brown and Harper both borrowed a form. The third writer in this section actually stops borrowing and he reinvents the memoir for his purposes. James Weldon Johnson wore many hats, and his best-known roles may not actually be as an author. He headed the NAACP for years, where he was instrumental in anti-lynching campaigns, and he wrote the lyrics to Lift Every Voice and Sing. The novel is about a man's continuing struggles over his racial identity. He can, at various points in his life, pass for white, which he does for a period of time. When he witnesses a lynching, he's moved to consider living as a white person for the rest of his life. Stylistically, the autobiography of the ex-colored man is an early adopter of modernist trends like the unreliable first-person narrator and skepticism toward progress. This book also anticipates many of the themes of the Harlem Renaissance and of later novels like Native Son and Invisible Man that exploit their narrators' subjectivity for effect. Its themes on passing and its modernist leanings make ex-colored man both a worthy ancestor of Clotel and Iola Leroy, as well as a frontrunner for those later books. The beginning of the Harlem Renaissance signals that the borrowing is over. New writers discover they have forms available to them, and that they renew traditions that were already there. That's what makes this a renaissance, a renewal of history and culture, a creative flowering. And these authors provide 5 books, 5 different answers, all unique voices, and each writer builds a form that invites new audiences to fresh American expressions. But they don't agree on who those audiences are, and the disagreement is the discontent. As we've seen in previous books, an ongoing conversation in early African American literary tradition has been what is called the tragic mulatta narrative. By the time Nella Larson enters this conversation with Quicksand and the more widely known Passing, the genre has reached a maturity. Larson's Quicksand is about a biracial woman, Helga Crane, who struggles to find her place in society. In part, her identity is implicitly rejected by many institutions, but she's also very unsettled. It's these two forces, society and her own impulses, that draw her into cycles of discomfort and disappointment. Whether it's in the halls of academia, the streets of her mother's Copenhagen, or the cultural crowds of Harlem, she struggles finding a place where either her white or black backgrounds feel fully accepted. Colorism and biraciality struggles continue through 20th and 21st century literature in some form. But it's Larson's novels that present its most cogent expressions in the early 20th century. Larson's answer is that nobody's audience will hold her. Hurston's answer is to stop worrying about the audience entirely. I've discussed this book before, and I'll probably discuss it again later, so I'll move quickly to the next selection. But one last note. This novel is a direct predecessor to Black women's novels in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. In fact, Alice Walker, a prominent author from the period, is known for reviving Hurston's initial work for contemporary audiences. 3 years later, a writer decides the audience is exactly the point, and that audience should be made to suffer. Richard Wright's Native Son is also ubiquitous on this channel, so I'll not go into fine detail on it either. His work is essential reading for the formation of the 20th century protest novel. Although many writers like Ralph Ellison and James Baldwin refuted his key ideas, the novel is nonetheless a vital point in the chronology of Black literature. Wright wanted a reader who couldn't look away. West, on the other hand, wrote one who isn't being appealed to at all. The following novel should have received more acclaim when it was published in 1948. But The Living is Easy didn't land with the public. It went out of print and stayed there until it was reissued in the 80s. Dorothy West is probably best known for the book The Wedding, but it was her first novel that introduced her long fiction to the world. And the world said, no thank you. That doesn't mean it doesn't achieve essential status on this list. West was affiliated with the Harlem Renaissance, but her novel represents its closing. West oversaw the last months of the famous era magazine, The Challenge. You probably won't like this book's main character, Cleo. She manipulates, she lies, overspends her wealthy husband's money to bring her 3 sisters to Boston. In the process, she ends up destroying their marriages in order to seemingly relive her childhood. Despite her not being very likable, the narration never seems to judge. Instead, she's presented as is, which represents a unique moment in the tradition. There's no appeal to an audience other than living through Cleo's vices, which is a daring move for a black main character and her author. But Cleo is genuinely charming, even if she's selfish, and her story reveals a lot about some of the migration themes we've seen in some of her past novels. And the last book in this section takes all of those arguments and runs them through jazz. Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison is included in this list. To keep this video short, I'll refer you to its deep dive on this very channel a couple of episodes ago. It's a fantastic video and the presenter, very handsome. African American literature enters a new era and style in the 60s and the 70s. It's called the Black Arts Movement, or BAM, and they found their inspiration in the Civil Rights era. None of the following books really sit within this movement specifically, but they do cross it. They even sit within the same weather. But because their direction of travel is the South and their medium is the novel, their official role remains on the outside of this movement. A key component of the era is a spirit of reclamation and liberation. These novels sit at the hinge when the Great Migration slows and a black population begins to move back to the South in the late 70s. It's no wonder that these novels look southward, and from this southern glance, they gaze toward history and a past to remember. But remember how? That's what each novel attempts to answer, and these answers are 4 different ways of getting at a past that left almost nothing behind. It's 1962. The civil rights movement is in full swing, and the KKK firebombs a Freedom Rider bus in just the last year. Around the same time, an author named William Melvin Kelly publishes A Different Drummer. In it, a farmer decides that he'll systematically salt his fields to spoil the earth, kill his livestock, chop up his clock with an axe, burn down his house, and if that's not enough, he walks out of the state with his pregnant wife. But soon thereafter, every black resident picks up and follows him out of the state. The obvious parallel is the Great Migration, but the novel poses it as a sudden and jarring event, and the ending has a finale you won't see coming. It's written from the perspective of white residents of a made-up area in the Deep South. The state motto in this place is, "With honor in arms, we dare defend our rights." And the black characters never take part in the narration. And it asks, will the people left behind be able to survive without black people? It's a reminder of the labor, capital, social stability, and really everything else the Black population provides the South at the time. If they're removed, how does that state continue to exist? Guess what? They don't. Kelly's people walk out of the South, but Walker goes straight into the antebellum teeth. No, this is not literal time travel, but it's a novel about an enslaved woman's life from before, during, and after the Civil War. Walker wrote it about her real life ancestor. In writing and reclaiming the woman's tale, Walker has also rediscovered an element of history forgotten by a general public. Her goal was to write about family, but she really wrote about history, and she took readers back to the South to find it. While Walker went back into history to recover someone, Jones asks what happens when history won't actually stay in the back. Gail Jones's first book was written about the South, but it was edited by Toni Morrison at Random House in Manhattan. This fact speaks to both Jones's skill and to the ascension of her themes. That is, the persistent generational effects of slavery and violence. Her protagonist, Ursa, is a singer from Kentucky in the 1940s who, at the beginning of the novel, is pushed down a flight of stairs while she's pregnant. Her husband, Mutt, may or may not have been responsible. The cost, she loses her baby in her womb. Her ability to be a mother literally and symbolically ends. Given the family history we learn later, this may be both a curse and, tragically, a liberation from her lineage. Ursa navigates relationships, and she reflects on her own family history. Two narratives run parallel in this book. One is her attempts to gain her life's equilibrium. I would say back, but she never really has it. Second is the story of her great-Graham, and mom passed down to her from Brazil. Unlike the American plantation novel that many of us might know, where sexual violence is a byproduct of slavery, down in Brazil, in Corregedora's house, sex is the purpose. And the saying that's passed down through Ursa's family, making generations, is an inheritance that survives in the DNA. The novel is a reminder of slavery's global trade, and in Brazil, it lasted the longest in the Americas until 1888. When the government ordered records burned, this made Ursa's family's oral history a necessity for documentation. So, Gail Jones built a form to match. 4 generations speak through one narrator, unannounced, arriving in the middle of Ursa's own sentences. It works like the blues she sings, the phrases coming back altered each time. A speaker who is also a vessel needed a book that couldn't tell the two apart. Jones's past arrives whether Ursa wants it or not. Morrison's has to be hunted, and the only surviving document is a song sung by children. The Road South doesn't end with Toni Morrison, but she's the last author in this section. The turn toward the South in history continues in future iterations, and each generation adapts it to their own times. Few authors has as much impact on the future novel than Toni Morrison. While Beloved captures most of the tension, her prose and style really soar in this novel, Song of Solomon. And yes, the pun is intended. The book has a cast of characters, and each one shares the plot's focus, but a character named Milkman Dead dominates most of the narrative. The story begins with a man trying to fly. He doesn't succeed. The focus then from there shifts to its primary protagonists, the dead family. Of course, Morrison makes a joke here. Their name was derived from a drunk Union soldier's registration error. When asked what happened to the family's father, the son explained, "Oh, he's dead." So the soldier wrote "dead" in the family name column. Morrison features other similar historical miscommunications in her novel, which have profound effects on the narratives present, and eventually in Milkman's search for a family treasure. But as some of the characters search for their meaning, other characters are left behind. And this may be the biggest miscommunication of them all. As we enter the 80s, Black authors are more widely recognized for literary achievements. Later in the early 90s, Toni Morrison's body of work was recognized by the Nobel Committee. She really capped off a period when many critics thought Black novelists had really, quote-unquote, arrived. But new controversies changed this argument, and rather than a rival, Black writers found a bill. After over a century of discourse, what did Black authors owe once recognized by everyone? This was a larger question. And part of the bill is aesthetic. A wide readership wants a book it already knows how to read. These three novels don't hand one over. Gloria Naylor's The Women of Brewster Place feels really like a direct descendant of recent novels like Cory Hedora and Song of Solomon. But its legacy may also be found in Hurston's unfiltered representations of Janie. Naylor's book has moments of violence, sexual and otherwise. But through these events, her characters find community, if not a way forward, in an otherwise bleak scene. Later in this book, readers may be reminded of Tea Cake's death and Janie's unrelenting grief, but also in their aftermath. Janie's life went on, and she found meaning in its continuance. The same seems to be true for the collected episodes in The Women of Brewster Place. Tragedies have an aftermath, and perhaps an opportunity for unity. The book's emphasis on women's collective perspectives means that no single character carries its weight. While they all have different lives, different education, different economic classes, and different histories, they all share a single place, Brewster Place. And that place has a literal wall at the end of it. It's a thing that closes the Brewster complex, the street, off from traffic and the rest of the world, but it's also a barrier and a limit. Their backs are up against it. Nowhere else to go but each other. Naylor's book spawned a successful series, and it earned her the National Book Award for the first novel prize. This spotlight also raised some minor controversies about her portrayal of men, but the novel was a real highlight of this decade. Naylor's answer was to refuse a single protagonist. That same year, Walker refuses the narrator. This is the book that I opened with. This list wouldn't be complete without Alice Walker's The Color Purple. Many of my viewers have asked about this before. With her success, a Pulitzer, and many scholarly achievements, Walker's ascension made her one of the most prominent literary forces of really several decades. Toni Morrison who? Her writing is unapologetic. She dared write a novel that begins with an epistolary form, or a story through letters, and the words "Dear God" over its beginning stretch. It's a bold ask of any publisher, but its form gives Seeley's perspective a centrality and an intimacy that the character eventually grows into. And that's the point of the novel. Walker represented Black women's love for one another as sisterly, maternal, sexual, and necessary in a way that naturalized it at a time when it was still deemed exotic and prohibited. It also invited controversy about the portrayal of Black men. And the conversation, it got loud. You'll see a source in my works cited list from Trudy Harris that explains more about these details, but the conversation became a part of the text. After success, what does a successful woman owe, and who gets to create that bill? Controversy over writing? Perhaps this is why Charles Johnson wrote Middle Passage, a book that won the National Book Award in 1990. It's a picaresque novel, which also makes it a satire and another bold move over a subject like Middle Passage. But the form is part of the novel's greater strategy to relax the boundaries of what the Black novel gets to be. The protagonist, Rutherford Calhoun, is a newly freed slave from Illinois, but in southern Illinois, nearer the Mason-Dixon. This means that Calhoun is still in a very, very fragile position. He's indebted to Papa Zarenge and forced to wed a woman in exchange for his debt, but he escapes aboard a ship, the Republic, that turns out to be a slaver on his way to Africa. The crew eventually meets a tribe with a mysterious philosophy, and they take on 40 captives and the tribe's god. The ensuing voyage prompts some serious reflections on philosophical and spiritual themes that specifically and explicitly counter the protest novel traditions handed down by Richard Wright and others. The claim that Black fiction should be free from its dualism, its approach to opposition. Whether this satire is a liberation or a desecration of literary traditions, this is the question that Johnson poses. And it's a broader issue in this decade from Naylor to this novel. What is the artist's obligation to previous discourse and, of course, to other writers? By the contemporary period, the argument has moved on. These writers aren't asking the historical record to admit them anymore, and they're not asking permission to write in a form of their choosing. They've taken that. What's left is the historical record itself. It's full of holes, false accounts, and names entered incorrectly. And each of these 5 books builds a different way to get at it. Edward P. Jones invents a new omniscience in the known world. He identifies deaths 40 years before their stories end, as if reading from records that don't exist. We've examined this book before in a past episode, so I'll tell you, the big headliner for Edward P. Jones' The Known World is usually seen as its portrayal of Black slave owners. Looking a little deeper, however, reveals a book about slavery's corrupting influence on everything it touches. Jones fills the gaps in the record. The next book declines to look at the record at all. Jesmond Ward's Salvage the Bones is another past TiltingAtTomes entry that certainly belongs on this essentials list as well. Her novel follows the Batiste family through events surrounding Hurricane Katrina. Ward refuses an obvious historical mode in her story, which makes this unlike the other books in this section. However, I'd like to make the case that the past is still here, and the book's emphasis on a present tense means it's more relevant than in these other novels. Through poverty, references to ancient mythology, and glimpses into motherhood, the past is a specter that haunts this family through the storm. Their survival is eventually a testament to both their past and present will. Ward stays in the present because that's where the damage is. Gyasi goes the other way as far back as the ledger goes. Homegoing by Gyasi is 14 chapters, one descendant for each, and no one appears twice except in memory. Gyasi bridges many gaps. The most significant one is both historical and continental. Originally born in Ghana, but raised in the United States, her novel closes the distance between America and Africa in a single wide-reaching story about two half-sisters from Africa, Effia and Essie. Effia is married off to a British governor on the Cape Coast castle. Essie is captured in a raid during a battle between tribes. While one sister sleeps upstairs in the castle, the other is down below, about to be sold off to America. Neither the sisters nor their descendants are left unscathed. Effia and her line are caught up in colonial struggles. Essie's generations experienced the entirety of Black history in America from Middle Passage to the present. Gyasi's contribution to this list is her extension of a historical narrative back beyond the South, beyond the protest novel, the Great Migration, Reconstruction, and slavery. She takes history across the Atlantic to Ghana. More than a memory, Ghana is a place and a name that makes history and literature concrete. Gyasi's record is continuous and enormous. Whitehead's is a field in Florida with nothing written on it. Colson Whitehead published The Nickel Boys after reading a devastating article about mass unmarked graves. Archaeology students excavated a property owned by the state of Florida and found the graves of students tied to the former reform school. The archive at Nickel has bodies it can't name and a survivor it named wrong. In the time around Michael Brown and Eric Garner, Whitehead tells NPR, he was incensed by a pattern of no one being held accountable. While he didn't want to write this book, he felt compelled to do so. Whitehead's approach to this book is an almost forensic account of the history's violence. He writes the archive and its violence flat, and that flatness really is the argument. A devastating comment on America's stance toward the violent notes in its own song. Whitehead works with a record that's missing, but Everett works with one that's famous and wrong. Everett's first move is to make the dialect a performance, taught to Black children and dropped the moment white people leave the room. It's a formal solution to an argument their tradition has been having since Hurston. From there, James pulls several important canonical threads that make James a great candidate for the durable canon. 1. It references and rewrites an old American classic, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. 2. James engages with the African American literary tradition with specific references, or even perhaps copies, of authors and discussions within the canon. 3. It's really gained enough formal recognition to make this book a highlight of this decade. So it's likely to be around for a while. I wish I could predict the future, but I can't. I can, however, give you my best hypotheses based on the narratives presented in this list. We've seen novels that take on the color line, activism, identity, history, and the archive. But what comes next? I looked at 3 different novels that I'd like to bring to your attention. These could be the next options for a list like this one. They could also be durable favorites that incite passionate readers and insightful thinkers for tomorrow. Will all of them stand the test of time? I don't know. So we're going to hold a committee and I'll need your help. Which of these novels will be the next Song of Solomon? Their Eyes Were Watching God, or even Homegoing? Did I get any of these next novels right? Should other recent novels be on this list? Leave your comments below. But first, let's take a look at the picks. 3 books. Same question every writer on this list has faced. Is there a form that didn't exist before? Honoré Fanon Jeffers' The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois hasn't received as much fanfare as I'd thought. Its substantial 800-page breadth develops a story about a family, and in a concurrent narrative, the growth of a young girl who learns about the ancestors over a lifetime. Dominion by Addie E. Kitchens may yet see substantial recognition, but so far it's flown under the radar. It may be oddly positioned as a book about a church family in Mississippi, but really it's much more than that. The story is an immolation of male privilege and dominion in the South. Tayari Jones seems to have written the introduction for it seems like every book on this list. And of course, I'm exaggerating, but only maybe slightly. She's recently become a central figure in American literature. And not a little of it's probably due to her reputation from this book, Kin, and her last book. Both of them have been lauded even really well before their publications. Where does the future of the Black literary tradition lie? With one of these authors, or is it really in a whole legacy? We've charted a lineage spanning generations. Over 20 books built it, each an iteration of a new voice and new form to capture it. A novel stitched together from news clippings because no form existed to bear the evidence. A fake biography. A woman on a porch just having a conversation with a friend. 7 stories, 7 women, backs against the wall. 14 generations, but no single protagonist. A boy honors a slain friend with a wrong name. Every one of these books exists because a voice, a reformation had no available shape to hold them, and a person needed to get on the page. That's what a tradition is. This is not just a list. It's 170 years of writers handing each other a conversation and reinventing the form it takes. This is also why this list can't really ever be completed. The conversation always has another speaker. So again, 3 books at the end. One of them might be on somebody's version of this list in about 30 years. Think about it and tell me which one and tell me what I've left out. Because the discussion never ends and it's your turn to write the next voice. Thank you for watching. Look for more episodes on American and African American literature on this channel. This has been Tilting at Tomes. I'm Ben.